The Galactic Academy of Sciences on Valoris Prime was considered the finest institution in 7 star systems. Its halls were carved from luminite crystal, its faculty drawn from species with lifespans measured in centuries, and its students, the brightest young minds the galaxy had to offer. And then there was Ethan Cross. He sat in the 3rd row of Professor Cale Veron's advanced xenobiology class, slouched slightly in a chair clearly designed for a species with 4 limbs arranged differently than his own. He was the only human in the room. He was also, according to his attendance record, the only student who had fallen asleep 3 times this semester during a lecture on apex predator classification. The irony was not lost on those who knew what humans were. Professor Cale Veron was a Threnari, tall, gray-skinned, with 4 fingers on each hand and eyes that shifted color depending on his mood. Right now they were a deep, irritated amber. He had been teaching for 62 years. He had educated the children of senators, war heroes, and galactic engineers. He had never taught a human before. Cross, Veron said, his voice carrying the precise, clipped tone he used when his patience was fraying. Name the 3 primary defense mechanisms of the Korath Serpent of Daxis 4. Ethan looked up from the datapad he'd been doodling on. Venom, constriction, and the thing where it mimics distress calls to lure predators into ambushing each other? Veron blinked. That was actually correct. Acceptable. Now tell me the biological reason its venom has no effect on Daxian boarcats. A pause. Ethan scratched the back of his neck. Because the boarcat's blood coagulates weirdly? Something about their iron-copper hybrid hemoglobin making them immune to neurotoxins below a certain molecular weight? The class was quiet. That answer was not in the standard curriculum. That was 3rd-year biochemistry. Veron's eyes flickered, briefly, almost imperceptibly, to something other than amber. Where did you read that? I didn't, Ethan said with a shrug. I watched one attack a Korath serpent on a nature documentary and thought about it. It was 2 weeks later when everything went wrong. The class had moved to practical demonstration, a live subject study involving a caged Melloc crab from the swamps of Targon 3. The creature was roughly the size of a large dog, possessed of a shell rated at moderate durability, and was considered, by galactic standards, mildly dangerous. Ethan was looking at it the way a child looks at something mildly interesting. Cross. Veron's voice cut through the room. You have failed to submit your environmental adaptation analysis for the 3rd consecutive assignment. Ethan didn't look away from the crab. I've been working on it. You have been doodling on your datapad during lectures and submitting nothing. Those doodles are anatomical sketches. I learn better visually. Something in Veron snapped. 62 years of teaching. Galactic Senator's children. And this Deathworlder, sitting in his classroom sketching pictures while barely pretending to pay attention. Stand up, Veron said. Ethan stood. He was not particularly tall for a human, roughly average, maybe 180 centimeters, but something about the way he stood made him seem like he occupied more space than he should. Veron crossed to him in 3 strides, raised one 4-fingered hand, and struck him open-palmed across the upper arm. It was a traditional Threnari disciplinary gesture. Not violent by their standards, a sharp corrective strike, the kind used to snap a distracted student to attention. Veron had used it perhaps a dozen times in his career. On Threnari students, it stung. It was meant to. The sound it made against Ethan's arm was different than expected. Not the soft thwop of contact with typical student tissue. Something denser. Almost like striking a surface that had more resistance than it had any right to have. For exactly 1 second, nothing happened. Then Ethan turned to look at Veron. His expression was calm. Curious, even. And Veron noticed, with dawning horror, that his hand felt wrong. He looked down. 2 of his fingers were bent at angles they were not designed to bend at. The room went very, very quiet. It's called muscle density, the Academy medic explained to Veron as she set two of his fingers in a stabilizing brace. Her name was Dr. Soon, and she was Pelari, a species known for composure under pressure. Even she looked somewhat shaken. Humans from Earth have skeletal muscle tissue that is, on average, significantly denser than most species in the Concord. It's an adaptation. Their homeworld's gravity, their evolutionary history as persistence hunters, generations of physical labor, it compresses the muscle fibers in ways that make blunt trauma contact inadvisable. Veron stared at his hand. I struck him. I struck a student. You also fractured 2 fingers doing it, Sun said. Against his arm. While he was standing still. Why didn't he react? Oh, he felt it, she said. Humans aren't impervious. But their pain response is different. They describe minor to moderate pain as essentially background noise. Something to be noted and categorized rather than reacted to. She paused. He did ask me afterward if you needed help. He seemed genuinely concerned. Veron closed his eyes. Ethan knocked on the door of Veron's office that evening. The professor considered not answering. Then he considered that avoiding a human was probably not a dignified way to handle this. Come in. Ethan came in. He was holding a datapad, and he set it on the desk without preamble. On the screen was a 47-page document, handwritten annotations, sketches, cross-referenced biological data, 3 original hypotheses about adaptation pressures in high-gravity Deathworld ecosystems. My assignment, Ethan said. All 3 of them. Plus some extra stuff I found interesting. Veron looked at the screen. Then at Ethan. This is months of work. 2 weeks, Ethan corrected. I had a lot of questions, so I kept going. Veron was quiet for a long moment. Why did you not submit it? I wasn't done. Ethan said it like this was obvious. I don't like turning in things that aren't finished. The deadline. The deadline is an administrative construct. Ethan sat down, uninvited, in the chair across from Veron, and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Professor. I know I look like I'm not paying attention. I know I look like I'm slacking. But I remember everything you've said in every lecture. I just don't learn well by writing it down, I need to sit with it, turn it over, figure out where the holes are. He paused. I've been waiting for someone to ask me what I actually know, instead of assuming I don't know anything because my submission box is empty. Veron looked at him for a long moment. His eyes had shifted, amber had faded to something cooler. Contemplative. You felt me strike you, he said quietly. You chose not to react. I didn't want to scare anyone, Ethan said simply. I figured you'd feel it in your hand. I was right. I didn't need to do anything else. He glanced at the brace on Veron's fingers. I'm sorry about that, for the record. Not my fault, but still. It was entirely my fault, Veron said. And he meant it. Professor Cale Veron included a note in the Academy's species orientation files 6 months later, filed under human students, pedagogical considerations. It read, in part, do not mistake stillness for inattention. Do not mistake silence for emptiness. Do not mistake calm for lack of awareness. Human students from Earth process information in ways that resist standardized observation. They will appear disengaged until the moment they demonstrate they have synthesized everything. Also, physical disciplinary contact is strongly contraindicated. Not because it will harm them, it will not, but because the same cannot be said for you. Ethan Cross graduated that year with the highest marks in xenobiology the Academy had recorded in a decade. He went on to work as a field researcher on 3 separate Deathworlds, by choice and enthusiastically. When asked what he remembered most about his time at the Academy, he said, the crab was cool. And I think I accidentally broke my professor's hand. He seemed fond of both memories. He sent Professor Veyron a card on Remembrance Day for the next 4 years. Veyron kept every one of them.